Hi, everybody. Dan Illman, very pleased to be joined by Andy Beyer as we take a look at the DRF race of the day for Saturday, March the 14th. It's race number 10 at Oaklawn, and we'll take a look at the field for this important Kentucky Derby prep, the Grade 2 $1 million Rebel Stakes at 1 1/16. I want to remind everyone that you can download free Formulator past performances for the Rebel on the Race of the Day event page at DRF.com. Access them and handicap along with us. 8 entered the Rebel, including the undefeated Bob Baffert-trained number 1 Nadal, who is stretching out for the first time, Andy. And our friends at Timeform US made a pace projector for this race. They expect Nadal to be out there on the lead, but they expect him to face pressure from the Louisiana Flash, no Parole. Do you see those two hooking up?
I think there's going to be pressure, and certainly Basin could, coming off a layoff, going a distance the first time, he's not going to be far back either. I'm not sure if pace is going to be the definitive factor in this race that we. That we thought in one of the earlier stakes on the card, but I think it's more of a question here of who the best horse is.
Let's talk about the number 1 Nadal for Baffert, a perfect 2 for 2 in his career. But I just hear Harvey Pack sort of in my mind saying, never play a favorite doing something for the first time. Nadal will likely be favored in the Grade 2 Rebel. He is stretching out around 2 turns for the first time. Now, Bob Baffert, we all know, has gaudy lifetime record at Oaklawn Park. Although it is interesting to note, I think he's 0 for his last 11 and 2 for his last 16 at Oaklawn. So maybe the reputation trumps the recent statistics. Let's go back to Nadal's win in the Grade 2 San Vicente. First race against winners. I thought this race was more workmanlike than brilliant, Andy.
Yeah, I was unimpressed by it. Nadal had won his debut impressively with a figure of 98. You think of Baffert horse, that's just the start of something big. I thought the San Vicente was a little disappointing. That was, first of all, that was a kind of a speed favoring track, although it was a little hard to judge. There were only, I think, 4 dirt races on the card, but Nadal and Ginobili, went head and head around the track. And yeah, Nadal won, but when you look at Ginobili's record, I mean, he's not that great a horse, and his one previous try at 7 furlongs, I mean, he'd really weakened. So when they turned for home, I mean, Nadal was supposed to pull away from him, and he didn't. He really had to work too hard for my taste. I just am very skeptical of this horse now stretching out to 1 1/16, and I think that morning line of 5 to 2 is a little off here. I mean, this horse is going to be 8 to 5. He's going to be a solid favorite with the Baffert reputation and an unbeaten Kentucky Derby contender, but I'm willing to bet against him.
Now, certainly the hype machine has been out for Nadal since before his debut. I would expect him to be going off at less than 2 to 1. Baffert's taking the blinkers off for those that are concerned about that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Baffert's done this in the past with his lightly raced 3-year-old, and some of the good ones, some of the better ones, horses like Justify and McKinsey. We'll see if that could spur a little bit of improvement out of Nadal. The number 2 is Accession. This is a horse coming out of the slower division of the Risen Star Stakes on February the 15th. He threw a little bit of a fit in the gate, but then we go back to the Lecomte 2 starts back, and he really didn't do much running. He was a giant price in both of those races, and I guess the hope is there's some sort of pace meltdown and he takes advantage.
Yeah, I don't know what their hope would be, although, when Asmussen puts horses in races that you're scratching your head about, it's not unprecedented for him to be right and everybody else to be wrong, but I really can't see this horse in this spot.
Let's talk about another Asmussen train runner right next door. That's the number 3, Basin, who won the prestigious Hopeful Stakes at Saratoga during their closing weekend. We'll take a look at the Hopeful right now. And this race, nothing to sneeze at. I know it's over a sloppy track, Andy, but he got a solid 85 Beyer speed figure for a 2-year-old in early September. And after that race, Asmussen was saying, well, okay, we want to stretch him out. We want to run him in the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland. He came down with a little bit of an ankle issue. He missed the rest of the year. This is kind of an ambitious spot to make his comeback to the races. I'm not sure. The Hopeful really didn't come back a very strong race. I need to see one from Basin before I get too excited.
Yeah, as do I. And he had a pretty soft trip in the Hopeful too. Sitting behind a speed duel and and winning with a moderate figure. Asmussen, look, he can do anything, but his stats off of layoffs are not nearly as good as his stats doing everything else. And so to ask this horse to stretch out, off a layoff against a pretty good field, I just don't see it. He could win, and he's certainly got some fast-looking workouts, but this may be a bit too much to ask for him.
It's been a tale of two trips at Oaklawn this winter for the 4 Silver Prospector, and the Smarty Jones takes 2 starts back. He caught the Mudlark Gold Street, who was able to control just a glacial early pace, while Silver Prospector was mired at the back of the pack. He came with a good solid run. You smoked him out of that race correctly in the Southwest, and boy, Ricardo Santana Jr. just gave this horse a perfect trip, saving ground, getting into the 2 path, inhaling the leader, and going on to a solid score with a more than solid 97 Beyer.
Right. There's, I liked the race. I liked him going in, but once again, when you see a horse win a race and you write in your notes perfect trip, you got to restrain your enthusiasm the next time. And I respect this horse. He proved in that race he can certainly be effective closing around 2 turns. He's got a great trainer who's certainly capable of winning the Kentucky Derby, but coming off that easy trip, I'm going to bet against him on Saturday.
The 5 is No Parole, hard to knock a horse that's never been headed in his career. He's only faced Louisiana-bred competition. He's destroyed them. We'll go back to his recent race at Delta Downs against state-bred stakes competition. And this has basically been a carbon copy of his first 2 starts at the fairgrounds, where he goes to the lead and he improves his position. I didn't think much of the field he was beating, so he's going to be facing tougher horses, and he's likely going to be facing a much tougher pace situation with the speedy Nadal drawn to his inside.
Yeah, I had trouble reading the pace in that race. Delta, they run slow fractions all the time, it seems, but it didn't look as if anyone was hustling in that field. And when a horse wires a field at 1-20 at a bull ring, you gotta. You got to view the effort a little skeptically. Again, and with Nadal in here inside him, he's not going to steal anything here. So I would say no Parole for me.
Andy, let's talk about the 6-3 Technique, hoping to become the 4th next out winner from the Smarty Jones Stakes on January the 24th, his seasonal debut. But 3 Technique, while he ran very well as the beaten favorite that day up against the pace scenario, this is a horse that showed a lot of promise as a 2-year-old for Jeremiah Engelhardt in New York.
Right. That race at Saratoga, I thought was, even though the speed figure wasn't dazzling, it was respectable. But if you watch that race, it was the kind of performance that you see a 2-year-old at Saratoga, and you might say, gee, that could be my Derby horse. 3 Techniques was on the rail most of the backstretch. He was just in tight almost the whole running, and he didn't have what would be called a big trouble call, but he just had traffic and got shuffled to the back of the field, and then swung 5 wide on the turn and just came flying. It was a really eye-catching performance, and you know the so you know after the Smarty Jones, you know. I look back at that race, and I liked the performance of the Smarty Jones, but that race kind of verified to me that this is a really good horse. The January 24th track we had talked about last time we analyzed an Oaklawn card was opening day, and was a very speed favoring track and a rail favoring track. And it was, because of the trip that Silver Prospector had on that day, that I liked him in the Southwest. Well, Three Techniques was also trying to come from off the pace, and he was wide all the way around the track, against that, trying to rally into a 48.9 half. So, I mean, he was better than Silver Prospector that day, no doubt about it. And I think he's going to be real tough in the Rebel.
And I can certainly see a great trip coming for him. We saw his race at Saratoga, and yes, he came from pretty far out of it, but this is a horse that's not some one-run closer. He is the tactical speed where he could sit third or fourth if no Parole and Nadal want to go out there and battle, if the California runner American Theorem wants to get close and show fresh speed. I could see Three Technique just sort of biding his time in fourth and gearing up on the turn. He's 7-2 on the morning line, but this horse has a lot of potential. The 7 is Coach Babe Andy. This horse is getting Lasix for the first time off of a win, but this is a horse that won on the mud in an off-the-turf race. It was a solid performance, but the horse he beat came back to run second in another off-the-turf race with only a 74 Beyer. So there's a lot of improving that he needs to do if he's going to upset this field.
Yeah, I don't think Lasix will do the job. I think he needs some of that stuff that we read about earlier in the week.
Let's talk a little bit about the 8, American Theorem, who made his debut for low-profile connections in Southern California, and he took a lot of money in that race into the teeth of an experienced Baffert horse named Hydrogen, and he proved the smart money right. He looked good winning that race. Again, an 83 Beyer for an August 2-year-old is pretty good. They ran him in the American Pharoah. The American Pharoah was a weird race in that the speed dumped its rider at the start. American Theorem was forced to play catch up against 8 Rings, who controlled a moderate pace up front. All in all, it was a good effort for a second-time starter trying a stakes race for the first time. American Theorem was going to go in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. They didn't like the way he was working prior to the race. They backed off. Here he is. I'm sure that they were hoping to avoid Baffert. Baffert drew the rail.
Yeah, I think this is a little ambitious. His American Pharoah performance was okay, but the two speeds dueled and went around the track together, and then 8 Rings beat him by 6 lengths, so that wasn't that great an effort. And when you always want to see a low profile connection do well, and to root for somebody who's relatively unknown, but this trainer's going back 5 years, his career record at graded stakes is 1 for 45. I mean, he's had a couple good horses, but I think this is kind of not the place for American Theorem to be making his 3-year-old debut.
As we take a look at our selections for this year's Rebel, the race has a little bit of everything. You've got the undefeated speeds, no Parole from Louisiana, Nadal from Southern California. You've got layoff horses with some ability, Basin from New York, American Theorem from Southern California. You've got kind of the gatekeeper right now of the Oaklawn 3-year-old division. Silver Prospector is nothing but a hard hitter, but Andy, Three Technique might be the horse with the most long-term potential. He's 7-2 on the morning line. He's your top pick. How would you play the race?
Well, at 7-2 or something in that vicinity, I might even make a win bet. I think that this horse really has good credentials. if Nadal is really short, I want to try to beat him. I would probably use Silver Prospector as my exacta horse.
It's the Grade 2 Rebel. It's the DRF Race of the Day with free formulator past performances available on the Race of the Day event page at drf.com. Post time for the Rebel, 5:23 Central. Best of luck.